Imagine a fusion of the legendary Prince of Persia and the unforgiving challenges of Dark Souls, all wrapped up in a mesmerizing 2D pixel art masterpiece. This is Dark Devotion, a Souls-like action-adventure RPG that will test your mettle in a hauntingly beautiful yet treacherous fantasy realm. Now, let me warn you, Dark Devotion doesn't hold your hand. It's a game that believes in the power of exploration and experimentation. Sure, you'll get to see your key configurations and get a bit of insight from the enigmatic NPCs, but beyond that, you're on your own. Embrace the thrill of piecing together the intricacies of this world where every corner hides a secret and every step unravels a deeper mystery. So join me as we embark on an epic journey through the shadows, unraveling the secrets of this doom-laden game world. Let's dive into the abyss and uncover the enigmas of Dark Devotion. The intro is meant to set things up while also keeping them pretty vague. You get a sense the game is taking place in a world or realm where religious fervor and zealotism is a way of life, after which you're just thrown into a place called the Temple, and that's as much both you and your character know. The fights rely on timing your attacks and dodging or blocking those of the mobs. The basic Souls-like recipe, and however simple it always sounds, and honestly is, that doesn't make it easy. Even fights with low-level mobs can sometimes turn sour. Once you learn their audio and visual cues, your performance will depend to a certain extent on your build and the debuffs you're carrying. Because the more time you spend not dying, the more likely it is for you to gather a decent number of debuffs, which can change your default performance rather drastically. The same is true for buffs, but their positive impact isn't as palpable, so as to make the oppressive atmosphere of the world that much clearer. Thankfully, there are ways of removing these debuffs, but those methods also come at a cost. You can carry two sets of weapons, and depending on your playstyle, you can mix and match two very different approaches, depending largely on the gear you find in your path, because unfortunately, you cannot start with two sets of weapons after a resurrection. A bit weird, but oh well. Generally, I tend to favor a sword and shield selection with a bow as a secondary, because there are certain levers in the game that can be activated only with a bow and arrow. Although, mind you, the game will generally drop a bow just before you need it for such purposes, so it's not an asshole about it. The boss encounters in Dark Devotion are generally short and intense battles that require strategic thinking and precise execution, as well as knowledge of which boss you're planning to attack on any given run, so you can choose particular weapons that work best. One of the cooler things you can do in the game is that you can wield the boss weapons or their special items once they're defeated. These tend to pack quite the punch and look cool as shit, but will usually be extremely slow to use. So it will take some time and most likely particular builds to make them work. Your weapons and shields never get damaged, your armor and health do. Thankfully, there are consumables that can fix both of those things, but finding them is a different issue. There are also trinkets in the game, which can prove to be rather powerful depending on their rarity, and there are also some special temporary runes which will offer you occasional buffs depending on how much ass you kick. When it comes to whether or not the game is better played on a keyboard versus a controller, because it does come with controller support on PC, I am biased by 3 decades plus of computer gaming to always prefer the keyboard. However, I did try to play the game with the controller as well to get an idea of what it is like, and I think that the best control option will be whatever you're most comfortable with. I will mention that I found the attack and parry buttons being the right and left triggers to be quite immersive and interesting, but then again, I don't know if that's the norm since I don't normally play console games. There are 3 ways of upgrading and customizing your character. The first one is most obvious, getting items. Weapons, armor, trinkets, and consumables are dropped by various mobs in the game, but these are in general quite random, as you'd expect from a Souls-like. Although there are some mobs in particular places that will always drop the same things. As you discover more and more items, some of them will be saved to the forge as blueprints, allowing you to start a new run wielding them. The second approach is a skill tree of sorts, but one in which you have to buy the skills that you want, using the purple orbs that will sometimes be generated by mobs, alongside the white faith orbs. After you purchase your skills, make sure to also select them by having them encased in this cool frame, because I played the game for the first 10 hours wondering why the hell the skills aren't working. Once that issue is solved, it's all down to you creating a build for yourself from the various options you buy. The third way of customizing your character is reliant upon your interest in exploring the temple and its many rooms with their many doors. Most rooms have more than one way of getting in and getting out. Choosing which doorway you go out of will influence where you end up, and in many rooms you have to make a choice between going either left or right or up or down, because their design won't allow you to change your mind once you've fallen off of something. In some rooms you will find giant rune stones, which once activated will permanently upgrade some stat. Your stamina, faith, increase your damage or crit chance, that sort of thing. You can keep track of which runes you have with a very weird wall in the respawn area. This branching aspect of the maps also means that you won't be able to take on all the bosses in the same run. So if you're a completionist and interested in exploring the game to its fullest, you'll want to do several runs and take different directions. After some time trying your hand at the bosses and failing repeatedly, you'll start amassing enough skills, runes, items, and knowledge of the game to make the boss fights more approachable. Don't misunderstand though, I'm not talking about sheer grinding here. There's quite a bit of exploration to be done of the several areas. And while doing this, you will have to fight mobs and will gain lots of purple orbs and such. Of course, there is a grinding aspect to these games, but that seems to be less of a focus in Dark Devotion. Also, you will need time and practice with the world mobs to make it to the bosses with as little damage as possible. It's part of the Souls-like modus operandi after all. The game world leans heavily into the devotion/religious aspect, praying and kneeling being part of the gameplay. By praying at certain points, you'll be spending your amassed faith to open doors, gain blessings, or cure diseases. Exiting the temple does not lead you to salvation, by the way, not by a long shot. It takes you into a magical forest, introducing a stark contrast to the foreboding atmosphere of the temple. However, the forest is no less treacherous, presenting even deadlier threats. And rest assured, regardless of what you do, returning to the temple is guaranteed since this is your hub. Various doorways within the temple screen will become available as you discover new areas of the game, so you can focus your runs on one section or another to learn the layout and boss mechanics. The art direction is appropriately dark, from both the visual standpoint as well as the aesthetic one. The temple, for instance, could give the Catacombs of Tristram a run for their money in terms of death and putridness. Dark Devotion definitely features a particularly high level of body horror. I would guess the devs took some inspiration either from the Hellraiser movies or from that Chaos Dimension scene from Event Horizon.
A dimension of pure chaos. Pure evil.
The choice to do everything in pixel art adds an extra layer of interpretive imagination from us, the players, making the atmosphere that much more evocative than if it were stylized in a more sharp-looking way. The music and sound design contribute significantly to the game's atmosphere, creating a haunting and immersive experience. The eerie audio enhances the sense of foreboding as you navigate the temple's twisted corridors and face its formidable challenges. There are times when all you'll hear are your character's footsteps, interrupted by the undead gurgle of a close but yet unseen enemy. Dark Devotion offers a challenging and rewarding experience for those who seek a blend of precise combat, strategic progression, and atmospheric exploration. If you're drawn to the fusion of classic gameplay elements from Prince of Persia and Dark Souls, this is a game that you should not miss. Thank you for watching. If you've reached this point, you might want to consider checking out the video on screen or even subscribing. I've been Steven Nonsense, I have a Patreon. Have a great rest of your day.